Boker Tov. Today marks the end of Pesach, and our focus shifts from Pesach to the counting of the Omer, leading us from the distant shore of the parted sea to Sinai and the receiving of Torah. It's yet another time when our Jewish calendar mimics the vicissitudes of life. Having experienced the trauma of slavery, we now walk toward the path of redemption. Our Haggadah tells us, it reminds us, as though we were there, that slavery was incredibly hard, the hardest thing imaginable. And yet, so is the journey after the trauma towards wholeness and recovery at Sinai. As it was for the ancient Hebrews, so has it been for many of us, modern-day mourners. The rupture and the tearing of our hearts that happened in that instant when our loved one died was an unbearable pain. What followed was the burden and the heartache of Shiva, of Shloshim, of Yortzeit and Yizkor. People understand the instant sorrow that comes with death, but only those that have walked the steps of mourning appreciate how hard the journey to wholeness is. You don't get over death. You go through it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was right to point out the 5 stages of grief, of mourning, I should say: grief, denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, and acceptance. But we would be wrong to assume that each stage is the same length of time, or that the progression through them is entirely linear. Sorrow lingers. It changes us. But sorrow also teaches us. About 2 years ago, Sheryl Sandberg, the COO, the Chief Operations Officer of Facebook, very publicly mourned her husband David Goldberg after the end of Shloshim. David was in his early 40s. He was the founder and CEO of another tech company in the San Francisco Bay Area, a member of a conservative synagogue next door to the hometown that I grew up in, Foster City, California. And by all accounts, he was a mensch and a philanthropist. He died suddenly and unexpectedly one morning when he collapsed on a treadmill during a family vacation at a resort in Mexico. When David died, Sheryl was shattered, as many of us have ourselves experienced. It doesn't make much difference, though it does make some difference, if we are prepared for the death of a loved one or not. Whether it is out of the blue or from gathering storm clouds, when death strikes someone dear to us, it is like a bolt of lightning, instantly traumatic, instantly world-altering. Everything changes in that moment. They were here, and now they are gone. Those of us who have stood beside the body of our dear ones learn in that instant what a neshama, what a soul is. Sometimes the absence of something is what we need to understand what we have. When death comes, the soul departs. And though we might still hold the hand and kiss the forehead and brush the hair, they are not there anymore. The body was just the vessel, the container. The soul inside, that's what we miss. We will hold other hands, but they won't hold us back the same way. Each soul is a unique key to unlock the chambers of our hearts. At the end of Shloshim, Sandberg wrote a manifesto on mourning, a letter to her tens of thousands of friends and followers. It's a beautiful letter, and I shared it with you last year at one of our Yizkor services. Her letter and subsequent writing through her year of mourning have now grown into a book to be published next week, titled Option B: Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. In her original letter, Sandberg observed that when tragedy occurs, it presents a choice. You can give in to the void, the emptiness that fills your heart, your lungs, constricts your ability to think or even breathe. Or you can try to find meaning. Her observation echoes that of therapists and psychologists and clergy, that the way through trauma is to find meaning. She went on in her letter to list some of the most profound lessons that she learned in the midst of Shloshim. She wrote, "I have gained a more profound understanding of what it is to be a mother, both through the depth of agony I feel when my children scream and cry, from the connection my own mother has to my pain. She has tried to fill the empty space in my bed, holding me each night until I cry myself to sleep. She has fought to hold back her own tears to make room for mine. She has explained to me that the anguish I feel is both my own and that of my children. And I understood that she was right, and I saw the pain in her own eyes. She realized that Cheryl realized that the silence so many of us in mourning experience from our friends and our loved ones comes from people who just don't know what to say. That the void in our hearts cannot be filled with words. Real empathy, she wrote, is sometimes not insisting that it will be okay, but acknowledging that it's not okay. When I am asked, Cheryl says, "How are you?" I stop myself from shouting, "My husband died a month ago. How do you think I am?" And when I hear, "How are you today?" I realize that the person knows that the best I can do right now is to get through each day. Cheryl also learned that resilience can be learned. It was this particular lesson that served as the basis for her new book. Sandberg writes that 3 things are critical to resilience. Personalization, realizing it's not your fault. Permanence, remembering that you won't feel like this forever, that this will get better. And perseverance, that this does not have to affect every area of your life. The ability to compartmentalize is healthy. In an interview for the cover of Time magazine in advance of the publication of her book next week, Sandberg explained that the lessons didn't come so easily. In a very un-Canadian way, Sandberg realized that she had to ban the word sorry from her vocabulary. Her tendency to apologize was the result of an unexpected symptom of her grief. Sandberg completely lost her self-confidence after the death of her husband. It just kind of crumbled in every area, she said. I didn't think I could be a good friend. I didn't feel like I could do my job. She wasn't even sure that she could look after her grieving children. On her first day back at work, she says that she fell asleep in a meeting, that she rambled on and misidentified a colleague and then left at 2 p.m. to pick up her kids from school. And that evening, she called Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, to see if she should even be there anymore. And Mark said to her, "Take the time off you need." And that's what I would have said to someone in the same situation. But then he said something else. "Actually," he said, "I'm really glad that you were there today. You made 2 really good points, and here's what they were." That small vote of confidence led to one of the biggest changes Sandberg made in her life and her professional life. She was no longer automatically diverting work from people facing personal adversity or challenges. Now she asks if they want to do it because, counterintuitively, relieving people of some of their responsibilities could mean denying them a way to find their bearings, a way to find meaning. Once again, the way through trauma is to find meaning. Not in our suffering, but to find meaning in our living. What are we really here for? Life is finite, and no one knows that more acutely than you, the mourners. So what are you going to do to make meaning in the time that we have? For the Israelites in the desert, having just gone through the trauma of slavery, they wrote Torah, the ultimate meaning endeavor. They wrote their own Option B book. When all that they had known was in ruins, they took the lessons from that experience, the hard-learned lessons, and crafted a new way to live each day. Energy that was used to build monuments and pyramids of stone and brick would now stand even longer as pillars of morals and ethics and relationships. In the Time magazine interview, Sandberg explains that eventually she began to emerge from the fog. Quote, her mom didn't have to lie beside her every night as she cried herself to sleep. She danced at a party and felt momentarily happy. She didn't travel as much or have as many work dinners, but she got out. She started playing piano again for the first time in 30 years and created new rituals with her children. They started biking and having weekly family awesome fun days where one child chooses the activity. She embraces joy in a different way than she has before. Sandberg has faced adversity, developed resilience, and found some joy. But what she can't do anything about, what still makes her lower than the remote control, makes her low and feel low, is the fact that she cannot give her kids their father back. Telling them he was gone was the hardest thing that she had ever done. She avoids talking about it. But in her book, Option B, she writes, nothing has come close to the pain of this moment. Even now, when my mind wanders back, I shake and my throat constricts. A few weeks after Goldberg died, there was a father-child event at the kids' school, and a friend proposed designating a stand-in dad for David. Cheryl protested that it wasn't the same as having David there. And the friend put his arm around her and said, and this is a direct quote, forgive the language, option A is not available, he said. So let's kick the crap out of option B. Those who have come this morning to say Kaddish for loved ones, we are all living option B. This was not what we planned or when we planned it. Even if we all knew, as sure as the sun rises and the sun sets, that death is unavoidable, it is as certain as anything in life, we know that. But when it comes, we are still woefully unprepared. In some ways, it is harder on those that survive than those that have died. Living is hard. Living without our soulmate, our parents, our siblings, a friend, God forbid, a child who we were certain would outlive us, that is harder. Personalization. It is not your fault. We loved them when they were alive as best and as much as we could. And even if we were estranged from them at times, if we are mourning now, then we were loving them then too. But may have lacked the words or the courage to express it in a way that they could hear it or we could say it. Permanence. You won't feel like this forever. This will get better. Look around you. This community of sorrow. Some of you have been standing beside each other for Kaddish for decades. Grief comes in waves, but the sun also shines brightly at times on our faces. And though you stand here today in grief, you have laughed and you have danced and you have embraced each other and you have embraced life, even in the shadow of death. Life is for the living, and our loved ones would not want us to spend the precious time that we have in a constant state of mourning. That is why Judaism puts a clock on mourning. 7 days, 30 days, 1 year. Each successive chapter pushing us a little further back out into the world, back out into life. Pervasiveness. This does not have to affect every area of your life. The ability to compartmentalize is healthy. Make meaning in the midst of your grief. Out of the biblical wilderness came Torah. What will be the Torah that emerges from your wandering in this wilderness of mourning, in this desert? There is no end to grief, just as there is no end to love. But time does help. In the former, it softens the extremes. In the latter, in love, it heightens and enhances the memories. We forget some of the little things that bothered us about the other and focus acutely on the many things that drew us to them, that made us fall in love with them. In our Jewish calendar, we are marching towards Sinai at this very moment. 49 days till Torah is given. But even then, we will march for yet another 40 years after Torah in order to reach the Promised Land. Our tradition, just like our lives, are filled with option Bs. We think it's going to go one way, and it goes another. People plan, and God laughs. We would not still be here as a people, and we would not be able to stand here as individuals if every option A fizzled out and we curled up into a ball and cried endlessly. There is a time for tears, but also a time to wipe away tears, to find meaning in life as it now is, and to kick the crap out of option B, to honor their memory as much as to do anything else. May their memories be a blessing. Amen.